Welcome back to the House of Gouldians. Do you often get it wrong on the show bench when entering your single factor and double factor birds? And do you understand how to predict the outcomes of breeding for yellowback? So that is what today's episode is all about. We're going to be diving into a lot of detail on the yellowback mutation, and it's going to take the form of a slideshow. So very much an educational episode. Grab yourself a cup of coffee and let's get into it. Right, so the biggest problem with the yellow mutation is that you get a single factor form and a double factor form in the cock birds. And this is where a lot of people, when they're entering the birds, get it wrong on the show bench. So if you look at the examples I've put up, on the left hand side is your normal classic birds, so they do not carry the yellow gene at all. The middle column would be your single factor birds, and then the right hand column would be your double factor birds. Now these particular ones are easy because of the fact that they are purple breasted, so the single factors have more of a lime green color to their back. What gets tricky about this mutation is that your white breast and lilac breasted birds, instead of having a sort of a lime color on the back in the single factors, the single factor birds can also be basically yellow birds, and that's where a lot of people get it wrong. So we'll get into the mistakes people make later on in terms of entering the birds on the show bench, but you need to know that there is a single factor version and a double factor version. Moving on to the hens, however, as you can see, there is only your green and your yellow back. There's no bird in the middle. And that is because your hen bird can only ever carry one copy of the yellow gene, and therefore your hen is always a single factor. You don't get a double factor hen. Right, to understand what we're seeing in the bird, we need to understand what's going on with the pigments and the structure of the bird. So in a normal green-back Gouldian, the pigments and feather structure that we need to be concerned about for this purpose is the E-melanin or black pigment, which is represented by that black section on the top of the slide. The structural blue feathers, it's not blue pigment, it's structural, so it's the way the feathers reflect light, and that is what allows us to see the blue color, if you like. And then you get the lutein, which is yellow pigment. Now, when you combine the blue and yellow, if you've done any kind of artwork, you will know that you get green. And when we see a green bird, that is what's happening. You've got your structural blue feathers combining with the yellow pigment or lutein, and together they make green. What happens with the yellow mutation is that it starts to affect that balance of color. So in the black, it reduces the E-melanin and it becomes more of a gray in a single factor bird. The blue becomes a lot lighter and almost disappears, but not completely, and I'll get to that with the double factor. And then you get an effect on the back where the bird becomes more of a lime green color. So it's not completely yellow yet, and it's not the normal grass green. And why? Because the blue structural feathers, as I've just said, is being affected by the yellow gene. On the double factor version, the E-melanin from the bird is basically being depleted, and therefore any areas of the bird that would normally be black are now white. So the black under or around the face, should we say, around the back of the mask itself, if it's a black-headed bird, any black in the sort of wing feathers, that kind of thing, all of that is reduced and now, or removed completely in a double factor, and is now white. What also happens though is that the structural blue feathers are affected as well, and as a result you lose the lime green or the green completely, and it now becomes a yellow bird. Now There are other pigments at play, like pheomelanin and that kind of thing, or pheomelanin, should I say. Right, so that's the key sort of what's happening, if you like, from a structural and a pigment perspective with the yellow bird. Let's now get into some of the genetics. Right, to understand why cocks can be single factor or double factor, we need to understand a little bit about the genetic workings of the bird. So in human beings, we know that men have an X and a Y chromosome, whereas the ladies carry two X chromosomes. The birds are the opposite to human beings in that the cock bird has two chromosomes that are the same, the Z chromosomes, and the hens have a Z and a W chromosome. Now, why this matters is that only the Z chromosomes carry the back color in the case of green and yellow. That is why we say the yellow is a sex-linked mutation, because it is carried by the Z chromosome. And therefore, because the cock bird has two Z chromosomes, it can either have one copy of the yellow gene and one normal green, or it can have two copies of the yellow gene. The hen, because she's only got a single Z chromosome, she can only ever carry one or the other. She cannot carry both, and she cannot carry two of one of the two of them. Okay, so that is why a cock bird can be single or double factor, whereas a hen bird can only ever be single factor. Okay, so how does it actually work? So we know that you get one copy of the genes from your father and one from your mother, and it's the same with the birds. In the cock's case, he's passing on one of his two Z chromosomes to his offspring, whereas the hen is either passing on her Z or her W chromosome. If it's the Z chromosome, the chick would then be a cock bird, and if it is the W chromosome, it would then be a hen or female chick. And the two of them then combined to form the genetics for that chick. So the two sides of the DNA, if you like, one from the mom, one from the dad, combines to form the genetics for the new chick. Therefore, if the cock bird is single factor, it could give the copy of the Z gene that is yellow to the offspring, or it could give the Z gene or chromosome that is carrying the green gene to the chick. But because the hen only has one Z chromosome, if she gives it the Z one, then the chick would get a color chromosome from both parents. Or if she gives it the W chromosome, there is no color pigment from her side or color gene from her side. And therefore, whatever the cock passes on is what that bird would be for that hen offspring or female offspring. Right, so let's look at the genetics in a written form. A lot of people get scared by these, but it's really straightforward, and I'll explain it as we go. So on the top line, you've got the Z and the W that we spoke about from the hen. And on the sort of column axis, if you like, or y-axis, you've got the cock bird's double Z genetics, if you like, or chromosomes. Right, and basically you cross-reference them to get the different chick outcomes or combinations, if you like. And in column 1 is the cock offspring, and in column 2 is the hen offspring. So let's compare them. So if we take the first row of the cocks and the first column of the hens, they're both Z and they're both green genes, or carrying the green gene. So as a result, you'll see that the cock offspring from that combination would be, well, first of all, they would be cocks and they would be double factor green. If you look to the next column of the hens where the W is, you'll notice that when you combine it to the cock's first or second row, it then gives you your hen offspring, because one of the chromosomes is Z and the other one is W. Okay, so that's basically in the one row you're getting your cock offspring, and the second row you're getting your hen offspring. But because none of them have the yellow gene, all the combinations will only give you your classic greenback bird. Our second example has a single factor cock with a normal classic hen. Once again, if you look at the first row on the cock side, it's a green, so if you combine it to a classic hen, you're going to get green cocks and green hens. If, however, you look at the second option, in other words, he passes on his Z chromosome that is carrying the yellow, you then get a single factor cock when combined with the normal classic green hen, and you get yellow hen offspring. Remember, it's a roll of the dice per egg, because every single chick could get one or the other gene from the cock and from the hen. So you cannot look at this and say, right, one of the chicks will be a green cock, one will be a single factor cock, one will be a single factor hen, and one will be a normal hen, because it depends on every single egg which gene combination they get. And that's the biggest mistake people make when they're looking at these type of things. They assume that the percentages will work out exactly, and the reality is that it's a roll of the dice per bird. So in this example, we're switching it around. We're putting a single factor hen with a classic green cock, so in other words a double factor green cock. As a result, if you look in the columns, you will notice that all the cock offspring have to be single factors. Why? Because they're getting the second Z chromosome from their mom, which, because she's a single factor, is yellow. And then the hen offspring, which is when the hen passes on the W chromosome, combines with only the Z from the cock bird, and therefore all hen offspring will be green or classics. This example is the most fun example because you don't know what to expect. So why I say that is that you're taking a single factor cock bird and you're combining it with a single factor hen. If you look at the first chick outcome, in other words, the first row and the first column, you'll see that the yellow gene is passed down from both the cock and the hen, and therefore produces a double factor cock. If you follow that row to the hen offspring, you will see that you're going to get a yellow hen offspring or a single factor hen offspring. But now if you move down to the green Z chromosome of the cock and you follow that along, you will notice that it combines with the yellow, the hen, to give you a single factor cock bird, and then it gives you, on the hen side, it would give you a green or classic hen. So you're getting a little bit of everything. You're getting a yellow hen possibility, a green hen possibility, a double factor cock possibility, and a single factor cock possibility. Our final combination gives us all yellow offspring, and I'm not going to go into it in detail. By now you'll be able to read it for yourself, but all the combinations can only produce double factor cocks and single factor hens. Right, so now that we understand how the genetics work on the single and double factors, let's talk about the color faults on the bird. So on a normal greenback bird, we do not want patchiness. The green from behind the turquoise band in the cock's case, or behind the black line on the hen's case, should be the same green that extends right down the back and the wings. The moment it's patchy, it's considered a color fault internationally and under the new standard in South Africa. In terms of the blue feathers in the wings, this is also considered a fault for the same reason. So based on what we've learned, we know that If there's patchiness, it means effectively that there's bits of lutein missing in some of the feathers and not in others. So you can think for yourself, well, that's not normal. You shouldn't be missing pigments. It's kind of like if you think about your hair, you either blonde-haired or brown-haired. So the moment you start getting sort of streaks and that coming through, yes, you get natural highlights in hair, so maybe it's a bad example. But the point is, you're not going to get black hair and then blonde hair coming out. That wouldn't be normal. And that is what we're saying. So on a pied bird, it's different because then you will get patchiness. But if you're entering the bird as a classic, and that's the key, it should be even in color. On a green bird, there must not be blue in the feathers and there must not be patchiness. Okay. The next part is there shouldn't be yellow feathers in the nape. So you do get a mutation called a yellow nape, and there we would expect to see speckling, if you like, of yellow feathers. That would go under any other color and would not be entered as a classic bird. If you enter it as a classic bird, it's going to be wrong classed, okay, and potentially DQ'd because of it. Then there's another variation on that where the back of the bird's neck, or nape as we call it, the green feathers are taking on a yellowy color or a golden sort of color. And this is likely due to an excess of lutein, or there's some other sort of fault going on in terms of the structural blue. And that's why you're seeing more yellowing behind the nape. It is also incorrect. It is considered a fault internationally, and it should not be there. So we need to be careful when we're breeding the birds, because we're seeing a lot of this on the show bench. And if you're trying to breed a good quality classic bird, you should not be breeding a bird that has yellow in the back of the neck or nape. All right, so that's the green bird and the color faults in terms of the back and wing and nape colors. On the yellow bird, same scenario, we don't want patchiness, and the difference is, instead of it being sort of yellow and green different colors, it would be white and yellow. So you don't want white feathers, for example, in the wings, because what would that be if it wasn't for the yellow mutation? Those white feathers would be blue. So because now the blue's been removed by the yellow mutation, those feathers now turn white. So we do not want to see white feathers in the wings on a yellow bird, or patchiness in a yellow bird. And that's why I say the back, wing and nape should all be of even color in terms of the yellow in a good quality bird. Green feathers in the back, wings or napes would be considered tick marks and is considered a fault. It should not be there. So if you're entering a yellow bird, be careful not to select a bird that has tick marks in it, or enter it under AOC.
Right, so I hope you enjoyed that. I know it was quite long and very detailed. And then the final part is that I promised you I would sort out a misconception, shall we say. So it is partly true in that people say that on a double factor bird, the way to tell is that there should not be any of the turquoise band around the back of the mask. And they're not incorrect. Technically, if you think about it, with all the blue removed from the birds, it shouldn't exist. The reality is a lot of the birds do have some sort of remnants of the structural feathers left in the birds, and that's why the birds aren't pure yellow. So particularly the dilutes or purple-breasted birds, you'll notice that the back, even in a double factor, is still got a slight tinge of green to it, and as a result, they do have some of the turquoise band that remains. It is very light and very slight, but it is there. So be careful of that. It's a misconception. The best way to tell is to actually look at the black areas, so the black line that goes around the head and under the beak, and that must be grey in a single factor, and it will be non-existent. It will be white in a double factor bird. So that is the safest way to tell. The turquoise band, like I said, is sometimes still present but very light. So that is not a guarantee in terms of telling a double factor from a single factor. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the episode. I know I certainly did, and we'll see you in the next one.